Struggling to discuss sex and intimacy with your partner?
Not feeling met, seen, or heard in your relationships?
I'm Janelle.
And I'm Andrea. We're two midlife mavericks sharing our own experiences.
Messy AF and no regrets.
With marriage, divorce, polyamory, and pleasure.
We've learned that when you're brave enough to figure out what you want and ask for it,
with partners, friends, family, and most importantly, yourself,
you'll feel more alive and free.
Question everything, especially your mother's advice.
There's no rom-com formula for this, but don't panic.
Being alone matters. Honey, I can't miss you if you don't leave.
What if your breakup could be your breakthrough?
Our podcast is for brave hearts.
Anyone who seeks or has found the courage to confront their fears and limiting beliefs about breaking societal norms in the spirit of finding their truth.
If you're seeking permission to be brave in your relationships
and want to feel less alone along the way, we got you. Okay, brave hearts. I feel like my heart feels so soft right now. We just interviewed my cousin, Melissa, who is a devout Catholic and really expresses how God's heart moves through her heart. And I really, really respect the courage it took for her to get on this podcast. As she said, this is so outside of her comfort zone, but to just be in the presence of her own faith was really almost like a salve to my being.
Yeah. I'm amazed at what came through and how much resonance it has for me. Not a Catholic anymore. It felt like there was somewhat of a reframe around Christianity and Catholicism, and also an even greater understanding of how we're all moving toward the same love. Mm-hmm. And I loved how she described building a relationship with how she sees God, how she sees spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, brave hearts, enjoy. Hi, brave hearts. Welcome back to Permission to be Human. I'm Janelle.
And I'm Andrea.
And welcome to our latest episode of this season's theme of building a relationship with God.
Today, we're going to be interviewing Janelle's cousin, something close in the family here, which I'm really excited about. Melissa Detwiller lives on a lake in New Hampshire. Sounds so lovely. She's a mom to 4 adult children, enjoys crafting, eating ice cream, and running a women's Bible study. Melissa, welcome to Permission to be Human.
Thank you.
We are excited to have you here. And Bravehearts, as you have heard Andrea and I each talk, we know that this topic is vulnerable, it's edgy, and we're so appreciative of our guests who are willing to share this internal journey as best as they can in this relationship. So we're holding Melissa with so much love and grace as we begin this conversation. And our first question, Melissa, is, how did you first start building a relationship with God or spirit? And also just, what do you call this, right? Everyone calls it something different.
Yeah, well, I call it God. To me, God is a person. So I from the time I was a little girl, in my family, we practiced the faith, the Catholic faith. But I would think that it was when I was about 14, when I was in high school. I had moved from Brazil to the United States, and I went to a Catholic high school, and they had a little chapel at the high school. And I felt very different and very alone when I moved. So I think I started seeking God more to console me, to kind of help me through my tough times. And so they had daily mass, and whenever I had a free period and it coincided with daily mass, I would go to mass or just go and sit in the chapel for a few minutes just to kind of get myself centered again. And so I think that's probably when it first started.
So thank you for sharing that. So I love hearing this because I'm obviously I know you're from Brazil, and but you're what I'm hearing is that as a 14-year-old, that's a freshman, I'm guessing, right? Like
Yeah.
freshman year, it's already such a hard time in young people's lives, and here you are in a new country. I'm guessing like you are probably already spoke English, but that there was a big cultural difference, and that what I'm hearing is that God was like your friend.
Yeah, he definitely was my friend. He was he he's always available to all of us, but I felt like he was the only one who really knew what I was going through. And so he was the one I sought out at the time. Um, like I said, I was 14 and you already feel very different. Your whole way of being is changing, and I didn't really have anybody um, to confide, my fears, and so he was there for me. So in
So
college, that's a different transition. By then I had made some friends, but in high school, but now it was starting all over again with people I didn't know at all. And I went to a Catholic college, and they also, had a couple of chapels, and they had regular masses, and that's where I went once again to kind of get myself centered when I was struggling with the different, you know, parts of being away from home for the first time.
I love that you keep saying it helped you get centered. Can you describe what centered felt like for you?
I think it's a way of feeling that you're okay and that you have somebody that has your back. And so be giving you hope that you can like kind of do this. You can do this, and that he'll be there for you, regardless of what comes up.
I use the word centered all the time. So
Yeah.
it's like I'm like, oh, what do I do to get back to center? So I relate to the word. I hear you saying like, God as a person, you're referring to it as a him. Um, can you just explain a little bit more about your feelings or impressions or how you think about God?
To me, he's like a father figure, right? And God, he is everything. He is our creator, and I don't I we interpret God as a man, right? Because his son came and became man. So I think we, um, as humans, we have to identify them with what we know ourselves. And I think we identify him as a father figure, as a man, as somebody who is guiding us through life and wants what's best for us. And he is goodness, um, and he knows better than we do what's best for us. But he has given us the gift of free will. So he wants us to choose love, but we don't always choose love. But that is the ultimate goal, is to love the way he loves unconditionally, so that we can be forever united with him. Because when we don't choose love, that kind of separates us from God a little bit. And the more we choose the opposite of love, the further we get from God. So the more often we choose love, the closer we get to Him and the better we get to know Him. And when it's like a friend, when you spend time with a friend, the more time you're with that person, you get to know them better, and you want to do what's pleasing to them because because you think of them as such a great person that you don't want to do anything that would jeopardize your friendship. So
I'm going to pause you there because there's a lot of richness there to explore. I'm curious when you say choosing love, what are ways that you choose love? When you know that you could choose something different, but you're going to choose love instead.
Well, choosing love is being kind to your neighbor, like not always thinking about self. That there's more to life than just yourself. We were put on this earth to be part of like a community, and we're supposed to help each other out, living life as best as we can. And we all have different gifts. And so sometimes people don't know what their gifts are, but when you know what your gifts are, use them to help others. And in turn, others will do the same for you. And it'll just create a better community, a better life, a better just things will be run smoother when people are looking out for each other.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa, you mentioned that God wants us to move toward love. Do you feel like you're getting this message from Him specifically as you pray or on a regular basis? Or is this more from texts you've read? How have you received that message?
Okay, so I pray regularly. I pray every day, but I do read. I read the Bible. I read texts. I listen to podcasts. I do all those things. But I think the best way to get the message is by spending quiet time with God and trying to have a conversation with Him. I think a lot of times I'm guilty of this. I'm looking for input from all of these methods, books, podcasts, and things like that. And you're really what you're listening to a lot of times is opinions from other people. But if you really want to hear what God is telling you, you really need to be quiet. And because God is not somebody who shouts His message. He tells you in His whispers, and there's like movements in your heart that make you believe that what you're doing is the right thing. So it's kind of it's just and that's the thing. The more you do it, the more you pick up on what He's saying.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you.
Melissa, you haven't listened to my episode yet because it hasn't been released. But what I'm really hearing and what I believe is true is that there's a similarity to what you just described. When Andrea asked me that question, I was like, oh, I go inward. You need to be alone. You need to be able to listen. And things are very loud. And like, your intuition or the divine message, which is how I refer to it, is like very quiet. And it takes like practice and discernment. And so, as you're talking, even though my path is different, even though you and I were both raised Catholic and come from the same family, like my finding of God didn't come through the Catholic Church. But as I'm listening to you, what I feel is so beautiful, and I feel like part of the reason why you and I even connected for you to be on this podcast is because our spirituality and our faith and our belief kind of has led us to a similar outlook, even though the path has been different. And I can just feel in you, right? Like your faith, and you're talking about love of like, of this like good, bringing goodness into the world, like being a beacon of goodness for others.
Well, that's what I hope. I don't think I'm always that person, but that's what I strive for. That's what I would like to be. I would like to be, because I think God uses us as instruments to get to other people. And I hope that he can use me to reach others. And that's probably why I think I agreed to do this podcast, because it's totally out of my comfort zone. But if it can help somebody else in some way to be open to listening to God, then God will use me to do that in some way.
Beautiful. Oh, I love this. It's so awesome. And I just want to point out that you mentioned prayer and you mentioned being quiet and listening. Janelle, you reflected that that's something you also do as part of a spiritual practice. And we also, previously in the series, I think we can do that. Previously in this series, we interviewed a rabbi priestess, and she also said the same thing, right? Pray and listen. And the act of prayer itself is presence, and when you listen, then you'll hear. But so often she said, people pray and they're just like, okay, hope it comes, right? Then they're going back to the dishes, right? So I love that there's already the motion of so many rivers flowing into the same ocean.
Yeah. And I think, what you're saying, what I hear is, you're interviewing all of us who are of different beliefs in a way. But we're all seeking truth. We all are seeking the same thing, but so often in our society, we focus on our differences instead of focusing on our similarities. And I think life would be much better for everyone if we, focused on our similarities and try to work together instead of alienating each other because, you don't think exactly like I do. And God made us unique for a reason. Each one of us is a unrepeatable miracle. So each one of us has value in some way. And so we need to take advantage of each person's uniqueness and celebrate it.
So beautiful. Do you consider a relationship with God different than a relationship with self?
Yes. God is separate than I am. He created me, but he wants a relationship with me. And so it's like, it's almost like a marriage, when two people come together as a couple, as a married couple, you become one, but you're still separate. So I think that's kind of like the relationship with God and me. Like he is more than I could ever be, but because he is the Almighty. but he still looks at me as an important creation that he wants a relationship with.
When you said that, like, coming together, what I heard there is that in coming together, though, you are one, right? That, like,
it's kind of like almost like your heart becomes the same as God's heart, because his heart is love. So the stronger your relationship with God, that your heart becomes more equal to his heart, the closer your relationship is. And so then the way you think is as one, and the way you act is as one, because you want to do things the way he would do it, or that he would think.
or what I'm hearing there is, if it's more from the heart led, right? If you're like, oh, you're following your heart, you're following God's heart. And in that way, that's the oneness.
Yeah, because what we want to do, what I want to be is more like him, because he is everything. He is goodness itself. And so I'm striving, we are all created good, but as a human being, we sometimes think more of ourselves than of a greater good. So the less we focus on ourselves and more we focus on God, the relationship with God, then our heart becomes more like his.
I appreciate your description. You're describing it differently than certainly I think of it, but I can feel the resonance of what you're saying.
This is fascinating because I was raised Catholic and definitely heard about God every Sunday for many, many years. And I certainly don't remember hearing it described this way ever. So yeah. I think it's sort of it's like helping me look at God anew.
Yeah, and I think, as there is so much to know about God, that it's almost impossible to know everything about God. And like I said, I from birth I was Catholic, but it wasn't until adulthood that I really started appreciating who God really was. And the more I know him, the more I realize how little I know him, because he's just so vast.
Have there been times where your faith has been tested?
Oh, yes, I'm sure. I mean, it's tested on a daily basis, I would say, I want to say that none of us are perfect, and I by no means am, and God knows that I'm not, and that's part of why there's the sacrament of reconciliation, which years ago was called confession. Now, so I think they changed the name, because when you hear the word confession, there's like more of a negative connotation to it.
Yeah.
Where reconciliation is like kind of like admitting what you did wrong so that you can repair the bond with God and be close to him again. And so so that's a big reason to go to reconciliation is because, you know, we all have little incidences that we could have acted in a better way. You know, even like when you're driving in your traffic, you're, getting angry at the person next to you, or why did he do that? Or, within your family, why are you saying this way? And you lose your temper. And so I need to, remind myself of what is important. And so I go to Mass on a regular basis, not just on Sundays, which is the requirement, but I also I try to go as often as I can during the week, because I need to be fed by his word and by his body, by, taking the Eucharist, and also taking part of, the sacrament of reconciliation as often as I can, because I know I need to repair my relationship on a regular basis, because I don't always choose love.
In season 3, Andrea and I, it was a different topic altogether, and it was how to talk to your partner about sex and intimacy. And it was a 12-part series, and the capstone one was we talked to a therapist who has called a repair process. And it felt like that was a summary that was the whole point of everything, was being in a relationship with another is knowing how to repair. And I've not heard of the new branding of sacrament of reconciliation. And I think it's so beautiful. Like, it feels so true, given like my experience of being in a relationship to another, of how do you reconcile? How do you repair? And so I'm fascinated by what you're sharing, and it feels really true in my heart that that's such a necessary part of being in relationship. Yeah. And in this case, it's a relationship with God. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Melissa, how does having a relationship with God help you find peace amidst all the suffering that is in the world?
Well, God gives me hope, because I know that he can bring good out of bad situations. So knowing that, it gives me hope for the future, for all of us. I think if I didn't think that way, it'd be a really depressing life, because life is hard. There's people let you down on a regular basis, and you let other people down on a regular basis. But if you keep working toward love and believing that God can bring good out of bad things, then, it helps you on a regular basis, on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Does a relationship with Spirit give you greater capacity to directly support like the less fortunate? And if so, how?
Well, having a relationship with God definitely helps me to want to support the less fortunate, whatever that may be, because God wants us to take care of each other. And he, if you read in the Bible, there's plenty of stories about him, helping the less fortunate, and and that was part of why he was persecuted, was because he was relating to the less popular crowd, so it makes you realize that everybody has dignity, and everybody is entitled to love, and everybody has a story. And so if we take the time to listen, that we will be more willing to help them in some way, whether it be monetarily or, just by spending time with somebody, to listen to somebody who's lonely, or, and it could be anybody from children all the way up to, the elderly.
What I heard in that, right, when we started out by saying, oh, like listening to God requires like going in and being quiet. And then what you just said here was one of the ways to essentially do God's work and help those less fortunate is just to listen to other stories.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I was listening to this priest one time, and he was telling the story that he was in New York City, and he was going around with another priest, and they came across this man, and they started talking, and next thing you know, they're there like for an hour and a half. And so he says to the other priest, like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize we were gonna I forget how he put it, like get wrapped up into this conversation for so long. He's like, and the other priest said, well, sometimes what somebody else needs is just a listening ear. They don't need you to fix their problem. They just need you to listen. And to me, that kind of struck me as like so true. Sometimes we think that we can put Band-Aids all over the place, but sometimes you just need to hear what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the ways that you are out in the community and support the community?
Oh, I've, especially now that my kids are out of school, are not home anymore, I started getting more involved with my church. And one of the ministries that I'm in charge of is what they call the Giving Tree, which is at Christmas time. I talked to a couple of the like charities in the area and asked them to give me a list of Christmas wishes for like families in need or children and whatever. And they give me the list, and then I put it together, make tags, put them in the church, and then the parishioners each buy a gift that's on the tag, and then we drop it off at the different communities that I've contacted. And that's like one of the ways. I also, like you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, that I run a Bible study, or I facilitate a Bible study, usually with another person. And that's been fruitful for myself just as much as the women who are there. I mean, I've learned a lot through these Bible studies, but I also got to meet a whole new group of women that I probably have been seeing from afar for years. And people tend to go into church, sit down, listen, and walk out. But doing these ministries makes you more part of the community, and you get to know each other much better, and it makes for like a more loving, atmosphere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I also decorate the church. I'm one of a couple of people who changes all the arrangements for the different seasons in the church. And so those are just, some of the things I do.
Mm-hmm. You kind of started to go into this, but I'm curious, like, how does your relationship with God impact your other relationships?
Well, you know that God wants you to be loving. So sometimes people in your family get on your nerves and you might want to, get annoyed. And so it helps you to reframe how you look at another person and to remember that the fact that we're all unique, and because somebody's not doing things my way, doesn't mean that what they're doing is wrong. It's just a different way of doing things. And sometimes it can be easy to forget. And so being close to God kind of brings me back to that reality that, everybody deserves respect. And so through respecting each other, you can love each other better.
When we first talked about this, and I acknowledge it, that like, oh, talking about this topic can feel vulnerable, right? And you're like, oh, you're willing to be brave and have the courage to speak on the podcast because you're like, oh, if it can help one other person, right? And that's like find a relationship with God or whatever it is. And Andrea and I, our podcast is called Permission to Be Human because we find that it's not, sometimes we just need to be exposed to something, a different way of being, a different way of thinking, so it gives us permission to think or be different. And if you if you're talking to brave hearts today,
Yeah, how would you suggest someone find their deepest belief or spiritual path? What would be the first step they would take?
I mean, start a conversation with God, like talk to him like he's a real person. And then give him a chance to answer. I think that's one way. So praying, and some people say, oh no, I don't know where to start. I don't know how to pray. There's no right or wrong formula. Like I said, it started off as a conversation. If you want, now in this digital age, you can listen to sermons. If you're not ready to enter a church, but you can you listen to the gospel, listen to a priest, do a sermon. There's plenty of podcasts of different priests, Bishop Barron, Father Mike Schmidt. They are two very phenomenal priests that do great sermons to listen to. And they may be eventually, dare to walk into church and even sit there. I go to adoration, which is when the body of Christ is put in a monstrance, and you can sit there with the presence of God, and then just sit there and kind of like be quiet. You don't even have to say something. He, like, when I've gone through like different struggles, one of the things that has helped me is, sometimes you don't even know what to think or how to handle something or even what to ask for. Just sitting in the presence of Christ, somehow through the mystery of God, it gives you this peaceful feeling. And then all of a sudden you're like, I can handle this, and it's nothing that you can really pinpoint and say, he did this for me, but it's just this overwhelming, like, peacefulness that he's with you, and he will always be with you. But of course there's plenty of books and podcasts and things like that. Just pick one area that you think that would be helpful to you, and start listening. One thing I wanted to say that I haven't said is that when you talk to God, you don't, he's not like a slot machine that you go and you say, I want this, change this, do this for me, I need this. It's, he wants to hear about the good things in your life, as well as what you're struggling with. So treat him as a friend, like that you talk to on a regular basis, where you tell him the good things that are going on, as well as what's not going on, not so good. There's a balance. He doesn't want you to only come to him when you're struggling. But of course, if that's where you have to begin there. But talk to him, at all times, on a regular basis, about good and bad. He wants to hear it.
Yeah, my recollections of praying really, really goes back to there's two parts. Here's what I want. I swear this is the last thing I'll ask for ever. Please just give this to me. That's it. Please, can I pass this final? Please, can this boy like me? That's really the memory of it, is sort of going to him in trouble and asking that, rather than building that relationship over time. So, Melissa, do you feel comfortable talking about your relationship with God in society, in small circles, in your family? Is that something that you feel you can be open about?
I would say not completely. It depends who you're with. A lot of times, I think a lot of people don't want to hear what I believe or how I think. And I think that's why community is really important, because then it's a safe place that you can discuss, and question and talk about and help each other out. I am not working outside of the home, so I'm not in an office situation, but I have friends that are, and when they mention God, people kind of look at them like, oh, here she goes. It's like it's kind of unfortunate, because I think sometimes they need to hear from God, and maybe we're the ones that are supposed to help them through something. But you can tell in a conversation who is open to hearing what you're saying, and who is just kind of rolling their eyes or thinking, oh, here she goes again. So I don't feel that I can say everything that I want to say in public, because, and maybe that's part of the reason I was apprehensive about doing this podcast, is that some people might, and it shouldn't matter, what they think, but I'm human, so it does matter to me.
Sure.
But I try not to. I've gotten better at accepting that some people are just not there yet. And maybe the whole thing about the mustard seed, sometimes you just have to drop that seed, and maybe at that moment they're not open, and maybe that will just get in a crack that little by little will grow and will make them seek God again.
Yeah, what comes up for me is my dad and I have had these long conversations about like his path wasn't my path, but he can feel appreciative that I finally got to where he was hoping I was going to get to. And that's what I think a lot of us were told at different times, different people, different religions, right? Like, oh, it has to be this way and it has to look a certain way. And that's what God means. And what I've heard you describe so beautifully, right, is that like God is love. God has his heart that like, and by having a conversation and building this relationship, this two-way relationship, right? That get like, if that's the goal, that can look so many different ways. But I think a lot of people haven't been given that permission. They've been told it has to look a very specific way in order to have a relationship with God.
Yeah. Well, I also think that, the whole thing about I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. I think religion, there is a purpose for religion. I think God put these kind of parameters to help people get there. Get to him in a safer way, let's say. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but he's given us these guidelines, and these guidelines, if we follow them, will be the most direct path to him. But like you said, we are all different, and sometimes some of us have a hard time staying within these path lines, and so it takes us a little longer to get there. But I think going to mass and participating in a religion, I believe is important, because then it keeps you on a track to continue searching for this truth. And we need reminders. We forget. And so that's why I think God knows that we can forget very easily. So that's why he has established a church, so that we can go and get recentered again. And then like, oh, okay, that's right. I'm supposed to like continue on this path, because this will lead me to him. So that's, what I think.
Beautiful. Melissa, thank you so much for sharing your heart with us, and it's in its expression of God to the best of your ability, and being willing to share with our brave hearts your journey and what God means to you.
All right, well, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on,
Andrea.
Very nice to meet you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Hey, Bravehearts, looking for permission? Work with us. We offer Braveheart coaching. Follow us on Instagram. Meet us in real life at a Braveheart conversation. Subscribe to our newsletter. Do all this and more at our website, permissiontobehuman.live.